There'll be no bailouts, no handouts, no cop-outs. That's what he said, but look at the policies. Now we hear there's no bailouts, no handouts, no cop-outs. But what have we seen over the last 3 years of this administration? The bailouts of the predecessor, George W. Bush. You know, this president, I don't think I've ever heard any president in my life, going back to previous speeches and whatnot of before my time, I don't think I've heard one president in my life that was such a sorry excuse as Barack Obama. Old Barry boy. Barry talks about Bush this, Bush that. Talks about how hard things are, of what Bush did to this country. My predecessor this, my predecessor that. What I'm doing for America. No bailouts, no handouts, no cop-outs. It sounds good, but it's kind of like that, what was it? Was it the Savior and change you can believe in? Was that what it was 3 years ago? Change you can believe in. Huh. Change you can believe in. Well, let's scroll down a little bit here, because to me, there's just something seems very similar about these two guys. Don't they look a lot alike? Besides, they're in the same suit. I mean, one might say one's a black guy and one's a white guy, but as far as I'm concerned, they're the same color. They're the same color inside. And neither one of them is an American, by the way. No matter where they were born. Texas, Hawaii, Kenya, wherever. They're not American by what would be policy. It's stay the course. Bush and Cheney, remember how they talked about going into Iran? What are we talking about now? Going into Iran? Change you can believe in? I don't think so. So for whoever's watching this, whoever's out there that's still holding your breath for change you can believe in, it's not working out, pal. You're in denial. Some of you are my friends. Some of you are my family, some of you are my constituency, and people who I absolutely love and care about throughout this nation, obviously, all over. But I gotta let you know, if you're still following Barack Obama, you're not too smart right now. You may have qualities within you that are sharp and smart, but let me assure you, you're living a delusion and a fairy tale. And anybody who does not go against this president and stand up, I feel sorry for you. You get what you deserve. You do. From the oncoming doom of the economy to a FEMA camp to whatever. For those who don't listen to these facts and step to the plate and try to fight for the interest of your nation, future generations, and what have you, for those of you, you get what you deserve. But for the rest of us, some of those that are being laughed at right now, at home, perhaps by you or someone you know, guess what? We're doing something to try to fight for our country. The British Empire may seem so far over the top, conspiracy theory, outlandish, and you may not have what it takes to build a register. Well, that's too bad. But just like I've said before, at what would be the forum, the Arlington Mayoral Forum, here what would be in 2011 of August. Like I said before that crowd of people, and I'll say it to you, if the truth is too much to handle, well, guess what? That's your problem. Because I'm handling it just fine. That's right. So we're going to keep speaking the truth. We're going to keep telling you what you need to hear. And we're going to keep pushing to get this up in motion and to take back the nation state. Not in a coup d'etat, but in the essence as prescribed within Article 1, Section 8. Within our Constitution. Within our Declaration of Independence. That's right. So why don't you get up and start acting American? For those of you who haven't figured it out yet. We're losing the fight, so let's get back up and start going, shall we? So, we got the NASDAQ Composite, high of 11 years, an all-time high. Yeah, we have a high, okay, up at 11-year high, and we have the Dow is up to its highest point in 3.5 years. Now, what is this? Is this a reflection that everything I've been preaching so far about change you can't believe in? Is this a reflection that I'm wrong? Because the NASDAQ Composite, because the Dow Jones is going up? Is it? It could be. But if I was you, I wouldn't get too caught up on those little figures. Those are, as somebody labeled yesterday at the table, twisting was the word that the individual used. A twisting of numbers. As I was sitting back having dinner with people yesterday in a church setting, one of the individuals, as I was discussing politics with and economics, as we were discussing the circumstances of what would be the unemployment rate, he flat out mentioned, he goes, what's being happening here is a twisting of the numbers. And I said, absolutely, you're right. It is a twisting. And you can make numbers say anything you want on paper, but it doesn't mean it's reality. So, moving onward. Obama stated that, quote, the economy is growing stronger. The recovery is speeding up. And we've got to do everything in our power to keep it going, unquote. Now, I don't know what Obama is on when it comes to drugs or delusions or what, but I can assure you, if you were to go and say, go to one of those tent cities that are popping up. Go right down here next to the Stillaguamish River where you got colonies popping up. Go to some ghetto or neighborhood where foreclosed homes are popping up everywhere, or just go ask somebody that used to have a job but is now living under a bridge. Ask them if they agree with this president that the economy is growing stronger, the recovery is speeding up, and we got to keep it going. Ask somebody like that on Skid Row, or that feels that they may be there in the not so distant future. Ask them how their economy is going and the economic recovery. Ask them. I think they'll tell you where to go. UN proposes world tax to supposedly help the poor. Guaranteed, if you know anything about United Nations, it's not going to be anything about the poor. It's a way of raping and pillaging and getting some more money out of you to funnel money for some other account. Probably another 9/11 type event or something, most likely. So, trust me, you pay them money, you won't be feeding the poor. You'll be feeding the rich. You'll be killing the middle class and poor. The Fed seized over 300 more websites on piracy charges recently. We got Ron Paul crushes Rick Santorum in Nevada. Lawsuit by the ACLU filed against the government over assassination of U.S. citizens. And this specifically fits into National Defense Authorization Act of 2011, which we will be discussing more about in this program. We have the first adult diagnosed with a Tourette's-like syndrome affecting teenagers at the same high school in New York City, as doctors say that potentially brain infection could be to blame. But it's just very interesting that there's all these students, and now the first adult, that all go to the school are coming down with some weird Tourette's-like syndrome within a couple of months of each other. So there's something happening down there in that location. Who knows what it is? If it's something they're eating, if it's something, who knows what it is, but something's going on over there. So yeah, record 1.2 million people fall out of the labor force in one single month. That's the 30-year so-called low. So 1.2 million. So I mean that's it's a record for the amount of people in the labor force losing their jobs and getting canned. So it's a record high, not low. So while we hear the preachings of economy on the rebound, change you can almost believe in if you just give them 4 more years of your time, if you just put your neck into the noose and jump off the bridge, more like it, that we're in reality we're seeing 1.2 million people in labor in 1 month getting canned. That's reality. Is that an economic recovery? I don't think so. The U.S. warns Iran not to fight back against an Israeli attack. Now wait a minute. We hear Iran's bad, right? Syria, Iran, they're evildoers. But we're telling them if we attack you first, don't fight back? Now I'm confused. We're going in to beat up the bully because they've been picking on everybody. But yet, who's going in and picking on the bully? Wait a minute. It's our troops. It's United States troops at the direction of the Queen of England. Now that's interesting. Now we hear about how evil Iran and Syria and all these countries. Gaddafi. You know, one member of my family said that, you know, they absolutely couldn't stand Gaddafi. They think that they should be shot in the head and killed off. That's what this family member told me back in July on a visit from the other side of the nation, out here. I explained to this person, I said, I can assure you that within 18 months of now, I can assure you that you will come to like Gaddafi more than this president, and you will see that this president is more guilty of war crimes and genocide to a degree that Gaddafi could never compete, compare, or contrast with. Now this individual disagreed with me very much when I first made that comment. But step by step, they're beginning to see that I'm right. This individual will see this DVD as well, or should I say this presentation on the website here, and yeah, it's kind of interesting, but you know, we'll just have to see things play out. Some people have to see things for themselves. You can take a horse to water, but you can't make the damn thing drink, now can you? Obviously not. So, we have Russia blocking the UNSC resolution on Syria. UK Deputy Prime Minister on Iran conflict says, quote, certain countries might take matters into their own hands, unquote. Now, I mentioned this is a UK Deputy Prime Minister. And I'll say the quote once more for you. Quote, certain countries might take matters into their own hands. Now, what does that mean? It's geopolitics. It's not really that these other nations are going to choose to do what they choose to do. It's called us. The British Empire is going to help meddle in their affairs like we always do. That's really what they're saying. They're going to orchestrate the events to get other countries to do this and that and make things hard and hot and heavy on Iran and Syria. This needs to be stated right now. As I mentioned about what would be the road to World War III in hell, obviously travels through Damascus and through Tehran to the World War III stage of what would be the showdown. That's the full intent of what would be the British Empire. The British Empire don't care about Iran, Syria, or any of these nations. They have to destabilize the area under the circumstances to the point to bring this major conflict in which will bring about what they want, which is a world's reduction of the population to that of around 1 billion people. Now, some people would say, who in the right mind would ever do something like that, Kari? Nobody would ever do that. How could anybody ever do that? And they dismiss this stuff. This is about the time in the show when some people are going to say, this is, okay, genocide, 1 billion people down from 7 billion. Okay, this is where I can't take this anymore. This is just a crock. This is just too much crap. Turn off the TV. Turn off the internet show. Well, the truth of the matter is that the British have been involved to a degree that most people don't understand. And you actually read and listen and take a look at the doctrines, what they call for. This isn't top secret. This isn't conspiracy theory. They call for it. Flat out. Prince Philip stated, you know, Der Spiegel magazine even quoted him in 1988, I believe it was, that if there is such things as reincarnation, Prince Philip, the Queen's husband, quote, I wish to come back as a deadly virus to help contribute something to overpopulation growth on the planet, unquote. So, I mean, he says it for his own self. These are doctrines that are there. So, you know, for people who say that this is too much, this is just over the top, you know, the days of Great Britain and the United States being enemies and these issues, those were back in the 1800s, and we've traveled so far and beyond that perhaps some of you don't know your history, because these folks are involved in these circumstances. And it's not about weapons of mass destruction. It's not about protesters being trampled on and heavy artillery being used by sadistic, evil governments throughout the Middle East and countries of Syria, such as why we have to go in there. You see, the who's, what's, and how's and whatnot are little variables that they work out when the time comes. So it was never necessarily how or why we'll go to these nations, talking about the World War III geopolitical plan. It was, the fact was simple. They were going to get nations to get into this conflict, and the excuse and reasons of how and why when the time comes would be played out when the time comes. But these plans have been on the books for well over 100 years to destabilize the planet. So as what would be Abraham Lincoln broke the back of the maritime British Empire, they end up having to go down underground for a while and resurface later on as a financial-based empire. And we see this now through subsidiaries of what would be the British Empire, such as the Federal Reserve, the Central Bank, and the list goes on and on. Wall Street, you know, Goldman Sachs. You know, speaking of Bush and Obama, who do we have working in the Treasury Department? Who is the Obama appointee? He's a guy from Goldman Sachs. Remember old Henry Paulson? Henry Paulson and company? Who were they under Bush? Who did Bush appoint to be Treasury Secretary? People from Goldman Sachs. See? It's the same crew. So yeah, we got a new president. Do we really? It's basically the 11th year of Bush and Cheney, more like it. More like it. So, or 12th year technically, since he's already served 3 years. So here we go, folks. Here we go. We're going to move onward. We got global warming fraud. Antarctica has been cooling, and the ice extent has been at or near the record in the last few years. Now that's a little bit against Al Gore too, isn't it? Global warming, no. I can believe global cooling. I might be able to believe a little bit of that. Global warming, that's off the table. Google and Twitter under tremendous pressure by many nations to censor content. USA Watchdog, main political parties are just a two-headed monster that takes turns ripping off America. I agree. We go back and forth. Republican Congress, Republican Democrat Congress, Republican President, Democrat President, and we go back and forth. But do you see where habitually we're going? What direction? Down. It's a downward spiral. And step by step, the average individual that isn't the sharpest is beginning to see that. So maybe it's time to step out of the left-right paradigm, or the monster that's two-headed monster that's taking turns ripping us off. Maybe we need to find some independent candidates, ones who don't have loyalty to the party before you in the Constitution, but ones who are the other way around, who have the party off the table and off the list and have the loyalty to you, your interest, your constitutional rights, and the quality and standards of living for future generations to come, as defined by what would be the General Welfare Clause. Now, we get some candidates like that. It don't matter what they call themselves, independent, libertarian, Republican, Democrat, or what have you. That is of statesmanship and of the interest of the people. So, Zbigniew Brzezinski fears the global awakening. Now, Obama signed the National Defense Authorization Act, December 31st, 2011, allowing for the indefinite detention of U.S. citizens without due process rights, potential torture, and for being simply labeled as just a suspected terrorist or enemy sympathizer. And we will show a video here in just a moment going into this from what would be the Congressional House floor by none other than what would be presidential hopeful of the GOP party, Ron Paul, coming up in a minute, which discuss the technicalities of this bill. So just before we go to Ron Paul, I want to say for the record that this bill allows, that's right, for people to be potentially tortured, to not have an attorney, to be whisked away in the middle of the night, not for being found guilty of terrorism. There's a difference there. You know, you got to go through court, as we are innocent until proven guilty. Is that guilty till proven innocent? No. Let's put the horse back before the cart, where it's supposed to be. It's guilt. You're innocent until you're proven guilty. That's what it is. So, to be labeled as a suspect, well, that reminds me of a time in the past, back in the 1600s. What was that? I remember the Salem witch trials. When all it took, and this was based upon, remember, 3 sisters that admitted later that they made lies about other people in their community? That these 3 sisters started having feelings and dreams and visions and started seeing this and that, realizing that these people were into this evil, these practices, and so they had to be burned. These other people had to be burned at the stake, had to be drowned, had to have this and that happen to them. Yeah, it's interesting. So to be suspected a terrorist, let's say if I had a real asshole neighbor that lived next door to me. Let's just pretend for a minute here. And I didn't like him. Let's say he made up stories about me and this and that, and I just got tired of it one day. And I decided that I wanted to make up a lie about him. I wouldn't do that, of course, that's not me, but say if I did, or anybody else, and they wanted to make up some stuff and say, you know, I've seen people, suspected people with turbans coming in and out of there at night. I've seen handoffs of files, some kind of paperwork material. I've seen, you know, this and that. I can make up some stuff. That's all it takes, is for somebody to make up something as such, to potentially have their neighbor or whomever whisked away in the middle of the night. Judge, jury, executioner, all in one. That's right. And this bill also, what would be, throws a deep blow at what would be posse comitatus, which has to do with the constitutional amendment that has to do with maintaining that the United States troops do not police its people. They're used for overseas battles and confrontation and whatnot. But we have police to police the people. We have a military for military disputes. And there's a difference between how they operate and how they're supposed to operate. Simple as that. The police aren't meant to go in and kill. The police are meant to bring the peace and stability. Now our army and military, they're meant to come in and kick ass. And that's what they were trained to do. So, yes. So now this allows for what would be military to police the people. Military to try the people. And there's also, and I don't have the House bill number in front of me, but there's also, I believe it's called the Enemy Expatriation Act, which is on the table as well. Hasn't been voted on yet, unlike the NDAA, which is now law. But what would be this Enemy Expatriation Act, which I believe is what it's called, don't quote me, is a way that they're building the case on a